Apologize to my son now or pack your things." The words hit before I even sat down. Elaine Morton's voice cut through the glass-walled conference room, sharp and cold enough to slice through the hum of the air conditioner. 20 faces turned toward me, HR. Department heads, even the interns who'd stopped pretending to type. Her son, Chase, lounged 2 seats away, the corners of his mouth curling with satisfaction. He didn't have to say a word. His mother was doing all the talking for him. I'd seen plenty of chaos in my 20 years of engineering. But this was personal. I stood slowly, feeling every stare crawl across my skin. "You're serious?" I asked. Elaine crossed her arms, the diamond on her wristwatch catching the fluorescent light. "You've embarrassed this company long enough. Maren, either apologize to Chase or security will escort you out." I could hear my pulse more clearly than her words. For 6 months, I'd watched them twist data, falsify reports, and threaten my team into silence. I'd collected proof of every lie, and today, they wanted a public surrender. I reached into my jacket pocket and held up my phone. "You want me to apologize?" I said softly. "Fine. But first, let's listen to what really happened." The HDMI cable snapped into the projector. The room dimmed. My thumb pressed play. "If the audit finds issues, just blame Maren. She's been slow to adjust." Elaine's voice filled the speakers steady, unmistakable, undeniable. Someone gasped. The head of HR looked down. Chase's smirk vanished. "We'll frame it as her negligence. By the time the Pentagon asks questions, she'll already be gone." The silence that followed was heavy, alive. Elaine's hand trembled slightly against the table. I watched her composure fracture the immaculate executive mask, giving way to something raw and terrified. I stopped the playback. The screen went black. "I think that covers my apology," I said quietly. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the air seemed to pause. That was the moment everything shifted, the instant the balance of power changed hands. 6 months earlier, I still believed loyalty was enough. The first time I saw Chase Morton, he was standing in front of the plant entrance like he owned the place. Tan suit, polished shoes, a phone glued to his hand. He was 29, fresh from Wharton, and carried himself like a man who thought a diploma could replace experience. Elaine introduced him during Monday's all-hands meeting. "Everyone, this is Chase, our new director of operations. He represents the future of coastal armament systems." The word future hung in the air like a challenge. My team exchanged glances, half smiles that said everything they couldn't risk saying aloud. For most of them, this factory was home steel, grease, and deadlines had raised us more faithfully than our families ever did. I'd spent 18 years here, trained half the current engineers, and could still recognize the sound of a welding flaw from 50 feet away. After the introductions, Elaine gestured toward me. "Maren, you'll mentor Chase on the floor. Show him how things run down there." I nodded, though the word mentor tasted wrong. Chase followed me through the production lines that afternoon, taking photos, asking questions that didn't sound like questions. "Why do we need 3 rounds of testing for each armor plate?" he asked, scribbling notes without waiting for the answer. "Because the first catches material defects. The second checks alignment under heat, and the third ensures consistency." I said, "Skip 1, and you might as well skip all." He smiled politely, already dismissing me. "I think we can streamline that. My father believes redundancy is slowing down our delivery times. By the end of the week, he'd drafted his first efficiency proposal, cutting testing time by half and replacing 1 inspection stage with a statistical sampling. Elaine called it bold. The board called it visionary. I called it dangerous. When I tried to explain that the testing protocols weren't optional, that we were dealing with vehicle armor meant to protect soldiers, not toy cars, Elaine cut me off in front of everyone. "We can't afford sentimental engineering anymore." "Maren." The room fell silent. Chase stood beside her, proud, certain he'd already won. I forced a smile, nodded once, and told myself to adapt. But that night, as I walked past the quiet hum of the factory, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted not just in the company, but inside me. 2 weeks later, Chase's first set of efficiency reports landed in my inbox. The subject line read, "Production Optimization Immediate Review." I opened the file expecting harmless exaggeration. What I found made my stomach tighten. Material costs had dropped by 30% across the board. That was impossible. Either someone had rewritten the laws of metallurgy or they'd rewritten the specifications. I printed the documents and laid them beside the originals, side by side. The difference glared back at me. 4130 chromoly steel replaced with 7075 aluminum alloy. Tensile strength cut nearly in half. Heat treatment cycles removed. 2 of 3 ballistic tests eliminated altogether. I stared at the numbers until the letters blurred. It wasn't optimization. It was fraud disguised as progress. That afternoon, I walked into Elaine's office, reports in hand. Her blinds were half closed, the smell of perfume mixing with metal from the factory floor below. "Elaine, we have a problem," I said quietly. "If we send these specs to procurement, we'll fail the Pentagon's compliance review. These materials won't hold under ballistic stress." She barely looked up from her monitor. "Chase assures me everything meets our requirements." "With respect, he doesn't understand the requirements," I said. "He's removing tests meant to save lives." Elaine sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. "Maren, you're overreacting. This company has survived because we adapt. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." She gestured to the door. "Already done with me." I stood there for a moment, waiting for something, maybe recognition, maybe shame, but her eyes never lifted from the screen. 3 days later, an internal memo circulated through the plant. The subject line was simple: Project Delays Accountability. My name appeared in bold letters due to extended quality assurance checks under Maren Cole's supervision. Delivery timelines have been compromised. Further delays will result in reassignment of oversight duties. I read it twice, my throat dry. My own approval signature appeared at the bottom of 2 revised schedules, signatures I had never written, outside my office window. The production line buzzed as if nothing had changed. But something had. My trust in this company, 18 years of loyalty, had just been turned into a weapon with my name engraved on it. The factory was a different world after midnight. The air felt heavier, the rhythmic pulse of machinery replaced by the low hum of cooling systems. I stayed late again, alone in the quality assurance office, reviewing production logs and supplier receipts, searching for a mistake I hadn't made. The overhead lights in the glass-walled conference room down the hall were still on. Elaine rarely worked past 6, miss, but tonight, her shadow moved across the frosted glass panels. Another figure joined her, taller, sharper. Chase. I gathered my papers quietly, ready to leave, but their voices stopped me. "If the audit finds issues, just blame Maren. She's been slow to adjust." Elaine's voice, clipped and certain. My hands froze on the folder. "You really think that'll hold?" Chase's tone carried that same careless confidence I'd learned to dread. "It doesn't need to hold," Elaine replied. "It just needs to last long enough for procurement to sign off. By the time they ask questions, she'll already be gone." My heartbeat filled my ears. I stepped back into the corridor shadows, out of sight of the glass. For a second, I thought of walking away, pretending I hadn't heard, but that instinct had already cost me too much. I slid my phone from my pocket, thumb trembling just slightly, and hit record. The red light glowed like a pulse in the dark. "You know how she is," Elaine continued. "She believes in process. That's what makes her easy to corner. We'll call it non-compliance. And if she pushes back, then she pushes herself out." I stood there, the cool metal of the phone slick in my palm, recording every word. When their voices faded and the lights clicked off, I stayed still for a moment, breathing in the silence. My reflection stared back from the dark glass, tired, steady, resolved. For years, I'd recorded production metrics and inspection logs, numbers, percentages, tolerances, but this time was different. I wasn't documenting data anymore. I was documenting the truth, and for the first time in 18 years, I knew exactly what I was fighting for. 2 days after I made the recording, I found a note slid under my office door. No name, just a line written in careful block letters. Meet me off-site, Murphy's Diner, 8 p.m. I almost threw it away. Then I saw the initials scribbled at the bottom corner. E.V. Eric Vasquez, head of IT security, quiet, polite, rarely seen without his noise-canceling headphones. He'd always nodded at me in the hall, the kind of acknowledgement that said he noticed more than he said. Murphy's sat off Highway 17, the kind of diner where the coffee tasted like burnt asphalt and the waitress called everyone Han. Eric was already there in a corner booth, laptop open, eyes scanning the room before he spoke. "Thanks for coming," he said softly. "You need to see something." He turned the screen toward me. A series of system logs filled the display timestamps, access IDs, internal IP addresses. My email handle appeared over and over, flagged, mirrored, forwarded to an encrypted external account. "What is this?" I asked. "Your inbox," he said. "Elaine's been monitoring your messages, your call logs, even your work phone recordings, officially. It's part of a quality audit. But she's been building leverage." I stared at the lines of code. Every sent message, every report, every late-night draft, all of it archived somewhere I couldn't reach. Eric leaned closer. "You're not her first target. 2 senior managers left last year after similar audits. But you could be her last if you act smart." He slid a small black drive across the table, encrypted, military grade, back up everything: the audio, the altered specs, anything that proves what they've done. Keep it offline and keep it quiet. "Why are you helping me?" I asked. He hesitated, then said, "Because I used to believe in this company too." Outside, the headlights from passing trucks cast brief flashes across the window, illuminating the worry in his face and the exhaustion in mine. By the time I left the diner, the drive sat heavy in my coat pocket, warmer than the night air. I'd thought this was about a lie between a boss and her son, but now I understood it was bigger: a web spun from fear, loyalty, and surveillance, tightening around everyone who dared to question it. The next morning, I sent an encrypted email to Patricia Kincaid, one of the company's main investors. She wasn't just money on a spreadsheet. Patricia had once been a Pentagon procurement officer. I'd met her years earlier during a facility inspection. She had the calm confidence of someone who'd seen men twice her size crumble under questioning. Her reply came within the hour. "Coffee. Tomorrow. 9 a.m. Riverfront Cafe." Savannah's morning light reflected off the slow-moving river when I arrived. Patricia was already seated by the window, her hair silver and pinned neatly, a folder in front of her untouched. She looked up as I approached. "I've been expecting this," she said. No greeting, no small talk. I slid my laptop onto the table and opened 2 sets of documents: my original specifications and Chase's altered versions. For several minutes, the only sound was the low hum of the cafe and the river traffic outside. Patricia's expression didn't change, only her hand tightened slightly around her coffee cup. "These aren't cost reductions," she said finally, her voice low but razor-sharp. "They're federal violations." I nodded. He replaced certified steel with aluminum alloy, removed heat treatments, cut safety testing. Elaine signed off on it. My name was forged on the approvals. Patricia turned the laptop toward her, scanning faster now, connecting numbers the way only someone with decades of procurement experience could. If these specs were submitted under federal contract, they could face criminal fraud charges. She closed the laptop gently, as if sealing a decision. "I still have friends in Pentagon compliance. I'll request an unannounced audit quietly. You'll need to hold steady until it lands. For the first time in months." I felt something close to relief. There was a plan now, an outside force neither Elaine nor Chase could manipulate. Patricia leaned back, studying me. "Be careful. She'll sense you're not afraid anymore." That night, I stayed late again. A memo from Elaine hit the inbox just before midnight. "Full staff meeting Tuesday. Attendance mandatory." I didn't need to read between the lines to know what she was planning. The timing was perfect. Patricia's audit would arrive that same morning. Two storms, one of truth, one of power, headed straight for each other. By Tuesday morning, the air inside the plant felt charged, like the moment before a storm. People whispered in the hallways, avoiding my eyes. The rumor had already made its rounds, Maren's being forced to apologize. At 9:00 sharp, HR sent out a reminder mandatory staff meeting in conference room A. Attendance required. I didn't need the invitation. I'd been waiting for it. Elaine stood at the head of the long glass table when I entered, perfectly composed in her navy suit. Beside her sat Chase, smug and silent, and two new faces, company legal counsel and the HR director, both with folders neatly stacked. The performance was well rehearsed. "Please, everyone, take a seat," Elaine said, her voice syrup smooth. "We need to clear up some confusion that's been affecting morale." She turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Maren, you've done good work over the years, but lately your department's inefficiencies have put our contracts at risk. You've embarrassed this company long enough." The room went quiet. I could feel 20 pairs of eyes watching, waiting for me to shrink. My phone buzzed in my hand, a message from Patricia. "Auditors arriving in 20 minutes. Hold your ground." My pulse steadied. Elaine continued, "Before we proceed, I think an apology would show your commitment to teamwork and accountability." "An apology," I said softly. "Yes," she replied. "To Chase. He's been trying to modernize this company while you've resisted every change." I looked around the table, the engineers I'd mentored, the assistants who once came to me for advice. Most of them stared down at their notepads, pretending not to hear. I stood slowly, sliding the HDMI cable into my phone. The projector screen behind Elaine flickered to life. "If we're talking about accountability," I said, "then let's be accurate." Elaine's brow tightened. "Maren, what are you doing? I'm making sure everyone in this room understands what's really been happening." The room dimmed as the first recording began to play. Elaine's voice echoed across the glass walls. "If the audit finds issues, just blame Maren. She's been slow to adjust." A single gasp broke the silence. Elaine's smile froze, and I didn't look away. Elaine's voice filled the room, cold and unmistakable. "If the audit finds issues, just blame Maren. She's been slow to adjust." The words hung in the air, echoing off glass and metal. A murmur swept across the table, then silence so sharp it seemed to vibrate. Chase shifted in his chair, eyes darting between his mother and the glowing screen behind her. "By the time procurement asks questions," her recorded voice continued, "she'll already be gone." Someone gasped. The HR director closed her folder quietly, as if that sound alone could distance her from what she'd just heard. Elaine's face had gone pale, but her tone when it finally came was still polished. "This is taken out of context," she said. "You have no authorization to record private conversations." "I didn't need authorization," I replied, my voice steady. "You were in a company meeting. Planning to falsify defense data isn't exactly private." The door opened mid-sentence. 3 people stepped in, 2 men in gray suits and a woman in a dark blazer. Patricia followed, composed, carrying a folder marked Federal Procurement Oversight. The man in front held up a badge. "Ms. Elaine Morton." Elaine blinked. "Yes, I'm Inspector Williams, Pentagon Compliance Division. You're under review for contract fraud and unauthorized surveillance of federal partners." The air shifted, like the moment a machine powers down when everything suddenly stops moving. Chase tried to speak, but his throat caught on the first word. Elaine reached for her phone, only for one of the investigators to gesture calmly for her to set it down. Patricia met my eyes across the table. For the first time, she allowed herself a small nod. The recording continued, Elaine instructing Chase on how to replace the test materials, how to control the narrative, how to handle me. Every lie laid bare, every justification undone by her own voice. When it ended, I stopped the playback and unplugged my phone. The room was utterly still. Elaine's hands trembled as the investigators read her rights. Chase sat frozen beside her. The color drained from his face. I stayed standing as they were escorted out, the faint hum of the projector cooling behind me. For the first time in months, my heartbeat matched the silence around me steady, calm, and completely unafraid. 3 months later, the factory no longer sounded the same. The metallic clangs had rhythm again. Laughter returned to the hallways. The silence that once hung like fear had been replaced by something lighter trust. Elaine Morton resigned quietly, escorted out of the same glass doors where she'd once demanded my apology. Chase accepted a federal ban from all defense contracts and disappeared from Savannah's headlines as fast as he'd entered them. The company released a brief statement calling it an internal restructuring. No one mentioned fraud. No one had to. Patricia Kincaid became the new board chair. She moved through the plant with steady confidence, clipboard in hand, her questions precise and her expectations even sharper. One morning, she stopped by my office, glanced at the stack of reports on my desk, and said, "The board has agreed. You're the new interim director of quality assurance. Make this place what it should have been." The words landed heavier than I expected. Not triumph, just responsibility. My first act was simple. I restored every safety protocol Chase had cut and brought back the veterans who'd been laid off when budgets were optimized. They returned with quiet smiles and worn hands. The kind that built more than machinery, they built integrity back into the work. Every afternoon, I walked the floor myself, clipboard tucked under my arm like I used to when I first started. The smell of oil and steel felt like home again. I knew every corner of this place, every sound, every heartbeat of it. The new compliance charter arrived on a gray morning, thick with pages and signatures. As I signed my name, I felt the weight of every soldier, every technician, every unseen life depending on what we made here. I whispered the same words I'd once told my trainees, words that now belonged to me more than ever. Every signature is a promise to someone you'll never meet but whose life depends on your work. When I set the pen down, sunlight from the river spilled across the desk, warm and quiet. Outside, the tide turned with the morning light, carrying away the last trace of the old order. For the first time in years, I felt the world breathe again.